Snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is the deepest in decades, but these storms, which have been a boon to Northern California, will have little impact on long-term water shortages for the Colorado River Basin, a vital source of supply for Southern California. In fact, recent storms haven't changed a view shared by many Southern California water managers. Don't expect Lakes Mead and Powell, the nation's largest reservoirs, to fill up again anytime soon. To think that these things would ever fill up again takes a kind of leap of faith that I don't have, said Brad Udall, a water and climate scientist at Colorado State University. Lake Mead, located on the Arizona-Nevada border and held back by the Hoover Dam, was infilled in the 1980s and 1990s. In 2000 it was nearly full and sloshing at the spill gates. But the mega-drought of the past 23 years, the worst in centuries, has exacerbated the water deficit, leaving Lake Mead about 70% empty. Upstream, Lake Powell has declined to just 23% of its full capacity, and is approaching a point where Glen Canyon Dam would no longer generate electricity. Despite this winter's above-average snowpack in the Rocky Mountains, water officials and scientists say everyone in the Colorado River Basin needs to plan for low reservoirs for years to come. And some say they believe the river's great reservoirs are unlikely to refill in our lifetime. They won't refill. The only reason they are filled the first time is because there was no demand for water. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s and 80s, there was no Central Arizona Project, there was no Southern Nevada Water Authority, there wasn't nearly as much use in the upper Colorado River Basin, said Bill Hasenkamp, Colorado River Resources Manager for Southern California's Metropolitan Water District. So the water consumption was low. So that filled the memory. Demand for water from the Colorado River increased in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The Central Arizona Project, a 336-mile water supply system that brings water from the Colorado River to Arizona's most populous counties, was not completed until the 1990s. The Southern Nevada Water Authority was formed in 1991. Arizona began fully allocating the river's water in the late 1990s and Nevada in the early 2000s. California continues to use most of the river. Now the water consumption is exhausted. Every state takes too much and we have to cut back. And that's why it's just not enough. They would need wet year after wet year, after wet year after wet year, after wet year. Since the demand is so great, it would still not fill up, said Hasenkamp in an interview. Climate change has dramatically altered the river. Over the past 23 years, as rising temperatures exacerbated droughts, the river's flow has decreased by about 20%. Scientists have found that about half of the decline in river flow is due to higher temperatures, and that climate change is driving the Southwest's drying out. With global warming, mean temperatures in the upper watershed where most of the river originates have risen by about 3 degrees since 1970. Research has shown that for every additional 1 degree Celsius, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit, the average flow of the river is likely to decrease by about 9%. In several studies, scientists have estimated that the river's average flow could drop by 30% or 40% below last century's average by mid-century. The last 23 years are the best lessons we have right now, and they should scare people, said Udall, who co-authored research showing how warming is weakening rivers. Based on the low levels of Lake Mead and Lake Powell, Udall said he would estimate that the reservoirs would take about 6 consecutive extremely wet years to refill, with water flows similar to those seen in 2011. It would take us 6 straight years to refill this system under current operating regulations, Udall said. And I just don't see that being remotely possible. The Colorado River Basin could very well get a few wet years, he said. We might even get a wet decade. But boy, the long-term warming and drying trend seems very clear to me, Udall said. And betting on anything other than that appears to be misconduct in water stewardship that we need to plan for what looks like a worst-case future. The Colorado River supplies water to 7 states, tribal nations and Mexico. States are being pressured by the federal government to agree on cuts to keep reservoirs from sinking to dangerously low levels. Divided over how the cuts should be made, California and the 6 other states have submitted separate proposals to the federal government, with some disagreements centering on the legal system that governs the river's administration. Scientists have been warning of a coming crisis for many years. In a 2008 study, scientists Tim Barnett and David Pierce examined the likely decrease in flow due to climate change, and estimated that there was a 50% chance that the usable water supply in Lake Mead and Lake Powell would be depleted by 2021. They titled their study "When Will Lake Mead Dry Up?" In a study published in 2009, they wrote that based on projections involving climate change or even long-term average flows, currently projected future water supplies from the Colorado River are unsustainable. Climate change is reducing inflow into the Colorado River system, so more water is distributed through the arrangements than is available, said Pierce, a climate scientist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. This drop in reservoir levels is happening because we are holding to agreements that do not account for changes in water flow into the system due to climate change. There's always a chance of a few extremely wet years with the potential to replenish reservoirs, Pierce said. It's just that the likelihood is decreasing in the coming decades. Our work has estimated that if nothing changes, the chance of reservoirs refilling will decrease from about 75% today to about 10% by 2060. Water delivery schedules are created, Pierce said. We should plan for the situation where hotter temperatures will reduce river flow in the future. The capacity of Lakes Mead and Powell is gigantic, compared to the capacity of California's 2 largest reservoirs, Shasta Lake and Lake Oroville. Lake Mead can store more than 27 million acre-feet of water, and Lake Powell 25 million acre-feet. In contrast, Shasta Lake can hold approximately 4.6 million acre-feet and Lake Oroville 3.5 million acre-feet. The Colorado River averages about 25% of coastal Southern California's water supplies, while the region also draws water from Northern California through the State Water Project and other sources. Snow cover in California Sierra Nevada at this point in the season is now about 200% of average, while snow cover in the upper Colorado River Basin so far is about 140% of the last 30-year median. Increased snow cover could help Colorado reservoirs somewhat this year. How much will only become clear in a few months. Absolutely, this snow is welcome. The cold weather is welcome. The real question will be in the spring, said Hasenkum. In recent years, hot, dry conditions have reduced flows in the river. That's been the killer in recent years. A hot, dry spring took away the snow that was there, and doesn't make it to the reservoirs, Hasenkum said. Daniel Swain, a UCLA climate scientist, said an exceptionally wet decade could one day change things. But the problem is that not only does it have to be wetter than average, it has to be dramatically wetter than the long-term average, Swain said. And that for many years. Scientists say that higher temperatures are effectively making the atmosphere thirstier, allowing more moisture to evaporate from the landscape. Vegetation also absorbs more water as temperatures rise, causing less runoff to flow into streams. There is no question that there will be a sustained downward trend in inflows, but according to the U.S. National Climate Assessment, extremely high events related to climate change are also more likely to occur, said Kathy Jacobs, director of the University of Arizona Center for Climate Adaptation Science and Solutions. Jacobs noted that researchers predict that atmospheric fluxes will become more intense as temperatures rise, and scientists expect more intense extreme storms and periodic flooding. I strongly suspect that the dams on the Colorado will be needed in the future for both flood control and water supply, Jacobs said. As for the future, Jacobs said, much depends on reducing greenhouse gas emissions to net zero in the near future.